How are you feeling these days?
Nervous to answer 73 questions so quickly.
What's the best thing that happened to you this year?
I was given an Irish red setter.
What's the best thing that happened to you this month?
They thought they could control the narrative. They thought a few flashy headlines and a handful of paid influencers would be enough to erase the damage to silence. The backlash to bury the truth, but what Blake Lively's PR team didn't anticipate was that creators don't forget and creators don't forgive. Not when you try to ruin them. Not when you launch an orchestrated campaign behind the scenes to paint them as unstable, jealous, problematic, and worse. Because this isn't just some Hollywood scandal. This is about the calculated use of power and influence to destroy independent voices. And now we have the proof, the screenshots, the emails, calls, the silence breakers, and what started as a whisper behind the scenes has exploded into full-scale exposure, because when you push people too far, they fight back. And when your team's unethical PR plot harms not one, not two, but dozens of creators, from small commentators to rising documentary channels, the backlash doesn't hit quietly, it hits like a freight train. So this is it. This is the beginning of the unraveling of Blake Lively's media empire. And what you're about to see isn't speculation, it's not conspiracy, it's receipts, it's real, and it's worse than you imagined. Because what happens when the brand you built on charm, elegance, and grace is suddenly being accused of character assassination, manipulation, and targeted creator takedowns? What happens when the internet sees through the script and starts writing its own story? Buckle up, because this story doesn't just shake up the influencer world, it burns through the illusion of Hollywood perfection and reveals the rot hiding just beneath the surface. And now that it's out in the open, there's no going back, they said. Hollywood runs on image, but no one ever imagined how far Blake Lively's team would go to protect hers. Because behind every glowing article, behind every curated post, behind every late-night appearance, flashing that disarming smile, was a machine. And that machine didn't just spin stories, it buried them. What started as a whisper among small creators soon turned into a pattern. The disappearances, the demonetizations, the sudden floods of copyright flags. Then came the smear blogs that no one had written about until Blake's team forwarded them to entertainment journalists to use as sources. And then came the DMs. Anonymous at first, but chilling in their clarity, creators started sharing nearly identical experiences, a sudden spike in trolls, a few suspiciously timed takedowns. Then targeted gossip hitting Reddit, TikTok, and Stan Twitter, and it all circled back to one name. Not Blake directly, of course, that's how it works. It was always someone on the team, a fixer, a handler, a third party account, but the intent was unmistakable, and the effect was devastating. The narrative was clear. Any creator who so much as speculated about Blake's role in the Justin Baldoni fallout was either silenced or smeared. And while her team stayed silent officially, they worked overtime in the background. The worst part, it worked for a while. Channels went dark, reputations were crushed, collaborations were pulled, sponsorships vanished overnight. And the media kept calling her America's sweetheart, not knowing or pretending not to know what was happening online, until one creator refused to stay quiet. She posted a thread showing the timeline, showing how she received a cease and desist mere hours after posting a video that got traction, and how the same week a gossip account with ties to a known publicist started a rumor about her personal life. Within hours, that rumor had made its way into commentary channels, which then cited the gossip blog, which had been seeded by a fake source, which was traced back to a burner account connected to the same IP. As the publicist's assistant, the receipts were undeniable, and it broke the silence wide open. Suddenly, more creators came. Forward DMs filled up, Discord servers formed, people who never spoke on the record started leaking emails, screenshots of weird conversations with supposed brand partners who backed out right after a call with, quote, their legal advisor. Creators who were offered incentives to take down their content under the guise of avoiding defamation, but really, it was intimidation wrapped in legality. And this wasn't one or two isolated incidents. This was a coordinated pattern, a system of suppression. masked as PR management, and at the center was a name everyone recognized, but no one wanted to accuse Blake Lively, the actress. The mother, the icon, surely she didn't know, surely she wouldn't do that, but then came the internal leaks, someone from inside the circle who saw everything, who had screenshots from team meetings where they openly discussed YouTube threats, Reddit, chatter, and a so-called blacklist of creators to watch. And once that dropped, all hell broke loose. The list wasn't vague. It had names, videos, timestamps, notes, saying things like too aggressive emotional spin angle, not worth legal. Just smear optics are bad request suppression. Tempt monetization freeze. These weren't internet rumors anymore. These were strategies. And this was war. And for the first time, creators weren't scared. They were furious, because when you're a small creator, every subscriber, every view, every opportunity counts. And to have it yanked away in secret by someone with power because you asked questions, because you tried to connect. That's not drama. That's destruction. And now the tables were turning. The silence that once protected the machine was cracking. Creators were banding together, not just to tell their stories, but to document them, to verify each other's experiences, to track timelines and money trails and burner accounts that led to marketing firms, that led to PR companies, that led straight back to Team Blake. And while Blake herself remained quiet, her legal team issued vague denials, blaming third parties and rogue employees. But those excuses were unraveling fast, because too many dots had been connected, and too many victims had the same story, and too many secrets were coming out in real time. It wasn't just unethical anymore. It was personal, for every creator who lost income, for every voice that was pushed offline, for every channel that was made to feel small and paranoid. Now the light was shining and the illusion was burning. And this was only the beginning. The moment the blacklist leaked, everything changed, because suddenly what had only existed in whispers was now staring the internet in the face in clean font, on internal documents with creators' real names there, channels, their content summaries, and beside them in the rightmost column labels like borderline dangerous needs, monitoring leverage, sponsor cutoff, quest silent strike. Every name on that list represented a real person who had sat in front of a camera, shared their thoughts, reacted to a trending story, and found themselves caught in a machine they never saw coming. Creators like Jules Marshall, whose video titled "What Blake Lively Isn't Telling You About Justin Baldone" got flagged 5 times in 2 days and then inexplicably demonetized entirely. Jules thought it was a glitch until another creator DM'd her saying their entire ad revenue vanished right after making a nearly identical video. And then the dots connected, not just in timing, but in tools, the same legal form, language the same, request phrasing the same, targeting keywords. And these weren't just random takedowns, they were strategic, they were precise. And when the blacklist emerged, Jules's name was right there, under priority flag category, which aligned perfectly with the timeline of her takedowns. But it went deeper. The document included suggestions, not just to remove or block creators, but to redirect them, meaning if they couldn't be silenced, they'd be smeared. And that's when the second folder dropped screenshots from Slack channels inside one of the firms connected to Team Blake, with instructions to push anonymous Reddit posts claiming Jules was, quote, unstable, unprofessional, with a history of harassing celebrities, all of it fake, all of it timed to coincide with the peak of her viewership spike. And in the chaos, Jules started receiving hate from burner accounts with language eerily similar to what was in the fake Reddit threads. It was a full circle hit job, and she wasn't alone. Creator after creator after creator began coming forward, confirming they too had been on the receiving end of bizarrely coordinated hate trains that didn't feel like regular stan drama. They felt planted, artificial. And now with the leaks, the truth was undeniable. It was planned, it was institutional, and it was deliberate. And the worst part was how effective it had been, because creators who asked too many questions got boxed in. If they spoke, they were accused of clout chasing. If they stayed silent, they vanished from algorithmic relevance. Meanwhile, Team Blake pushed puff piece after puff piece about her philanthropy, her family, her fashion, and the entertainment outlets ate it up until One journalist, a mid-tier writer from a digital mag not owned by the usual three giants, cited to blow the whistle. She had been offered a feature opportunity, exclusive access to Blake for an interview. In exchange for not covering the YouTube backlash, and when she declined, she was ghosted entirely, and within a week her editor pulled the pitch, citing, quote, no longer aligned with brand interest. That's when she went rogue, publishing her experience in a blog post that quickly went viral. And in it, she detailed the media playbook used by Team Blake, including embargo requests, phrasing suggestions, and in some cases, full drafts of articles written by the publicist team sent to outlets with just insert journalist name here at the top. It confirmed what creators feared most, that this wasn't just social suppression. It was media manipulation, and it was happening at scale, and the more people saw it, the more people recognized the patterns, and a floodgate opened. Content from creators old and new began to surface, dissecting every move, every headline, every sanitized interview, and more leaked content surfaced, showing that not only had Team Blake been actively monitoring creator content through tracking software, but in some cases they had been tipping off certain stan accounts to initiate harassment while staying hands-off themselves. Plausible deniability, weaponized, and when confronted with the evidence. The response from her legal team was vague and cold, noting that any aggressive outreach was conducted independently and without Miss Lively's personal involvement, but that was the problem, because plausible deniability doesn't absolve coordinated abuse, and now the backlash was no longer confined to YouTube. It spilled onto X, formerly Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok, where creators began using audio clips from Blake's own speeches about empowerment and spinning them over montages of takedown notices and smear headlines. The irony burned, and so did the truth, and the question now wasn't if she knew, but how much she condoned and how far she was willing to let it go. Because every day that passed without a real statement, without a real apology, without accountability, the damage deepened, and what had started as a PR failure had turned into a reputational landslide. And yet it wasn't over, because a final twist was coming, one that would tie this entire web into a single undeniable thread and expose the name no one thought would be involved. What started as a pattern became a scandal, and what was once a theory became undeniable fact when the third leak dropped, this time not from a whistleblower, but a quiet email attachment sent to three mid-tier commentary creators within seconds of each other, titled simply, "Read this." It was a PDF of internal memos between two known PR contractors and a consulting executive listed only as S. Rogers. It's the same S. Rogers who was later confirmed to be Simone Rogers, a former agency veteran now working privately for high-profile clients like Blake Lively and her team. And these memos weren't vague. They were explosive, line by line. The messages outlined a strategic quarterly plan for managing negative digital narratives tied to YouTube creators, with metrics tracking impression loss, narrative control, and ideal outcome categories like discredit through doubt and redirect audience to partner content. And within those pages were actual creator names with direct quotes from their videos, copied, pasted, and highlighted with time codes and proposed responses. This one starting to shift sentiment. Consider silent throttle, and another one that read, if he continues posting, schedule backdated, flagging through third-party vendor. Meaning this wasn't just theory, it was an entire ecosystem of suppression, retaliation, and manipulation, and the vendor in question was a shell firm connected to a larger digital security group known for, quote, cleaning up bad press in legal gray zones. And in a follow-up memo someone had written in pen across the margin, ask B if okay to proceed next week, and then underlined it 3 times. And in the internal distribution list, B was shorthand for Blake, and while her team quickly denied that she ever approved any targeting campaign, the fact that her name was even mentioned in coordination with digital suppression tools raised every alarm, and creators who had once hesitated to speak now erupted. Videos went viral, threads blew up, podcasts brought receipts, and still Team Blake said nothing, and then the smoking gun hit a disgruntled former social media coordinator for the team came forward with direct screenshots of calendar invites. Labeled Creator Response Escalation Meeting, including names of YouTube creators, journalists, and even influencers who had liked or shared critical posts, and these weren't meetings to strategize honest engagement. They were suppression war rooms designed to find the quickest, least traceable method to freeze a voice without it looking. Like censorship from platform throttles to private advertiser nudges to soft bans, these meetings were all about control, and as these files circulated, creators began sharing personal stories of disappearing from trending tabs, getting emails from sponsors pulling deals with vague explanations, or suddenly seeing half their views vanish overnight, all within days of posting anything remotely critical, and one by one, their names matched the escalation lists, and suddenly, this wasn't just about Blake, it was about the ecosystem around her, a web of enablers built not just to protect her image, but to punish anyone who disrupted it, and at the center of it all was a digital footprint too wide to ignore cross-referenced metadata from the memos linked directly to timestamped activity across 4 creator takedown windows, and still the question loomed. What did Blake know? What did she approve? And who was doing this in her name or with her silent blessing? And when she finally released a tightly scripted statement through a spokesperson claiming she never condoned any targeting and that her team was committed to fair creator dialogue, it backfired spectacularly because the tone was cold, the timing was too late, and the lack of personal accountability made it feel like just another layer of spin. And as creators dug deeper, another wave of revelations hit. Blake's husband, Ryan Reynolds, had co-invested in a media management company now being linked to several of the flagged suppression efforts, and while the connection was distant enough for plausible deniability, the overlap was too convenient to ignore, especially when a 4th leak revealed that company had used influencer flagging templates based on creator personality assessments compiled by AI-driven tools to predict how likely a target was to fight back or go quiet, and the irony was unbearable. These tools were trained on creators' own content, their own voices, their own fears, and now used against them by people smiling on red carpets talking about empowerment and kindness, and the betrayal was too deep to undo, because this wasn't just a misstep, it was a betrayal of the very people who made the internet care in the first place, the voices who sparked real dialogue, the creators who refused to be bought out or silenced. And as the scandal gained steam, celebrity silence cracked. One actor who had once praised Blake in an interview posted a vague but loaded tweet reading, "Funny how some people build careers on truth and others build silence, and soon more voices joined, some subtle, some direct, but all pointing in the same direction. Something was deeply wrong in how this entire system operated, and the reckoning wasn't over. In fact, it was just getting started, because the final leak hadn't hit yet. And when it did, the name at the center would change everything, and the fallout wouldn't just reshape creator culture, it would shake the very top of Hollywood's carefully polished media empire. And if you thought it couldn't spiral further, if you believed for a moment that this fiasco had reached its peak, then you're in for a shock. Because part 4 is where the mask slips completely. This is where the curated facade collapses under the weight of undeniable exposure, and what we find underneath is worse than just a PR disaster. It's a systemic weaponization of influence, a pipeline of silence built brick by brick by those who believed they were untouchable, because behind every tweet deleted, behind every creator demonetized, behind every oddly timed copyright claim was a coordinated pattern, and now it's being laid bare. The spreadsheet of creators flagged by internal teams, the email chains, where managers floated ways to deprioritize dissenters in media coverage, the sudden rise of sponsored segments, painting critics as unstable. All of it fits, and it all leads back to a chilling realization that Blake Lively's team didn't just make a mistake, they engineered an ecosystem of intimidation. And what makes it more horrifying is how many platforms willingly played along. Because money talks, and Hollywood knows exactly how to speak that language, from agencies promising influencer deals in exchange for silence to publicists privately asking journalists to reframe the narrative to protect the image. It wasn't just about suppressing negative stories. It was about rewriting reality, and dozens of creators were caught in the crossfire. Some quit entirely, others are just now finding the courage to speak, and still others remain locked in legal limbo, afraid of further retaliation, afraid of another call from their brand deal partners warning them to back off, because whether you had 100,000 subscribers or 1 million, if you questioned the story, you were a threat, and threats had to be eliminated. Not publicly, of course, that would be too obvious. No, it was cleaner, subtler, smarter, and yet now in the wreckage of this fallout, those quiet tactics look like blazing red flags, and audiences are connecting the dots because suddenly creators from completely different circles are sharing eerily similar stories, sudden blacklisting, strange DM conversations, with brand reps disappearing collaboration invites after mentioning Blake's name. Even fan-run commentary channels finding their posts suppressed in algorithmic reach. It's no longer a coincidence, it's a system, and that system is now collapsing in real time. And what's most staggering is the arrogance that let it get this far, because somewhere along the way, someone in that circle, someone in that high-res meeting room actually believed the internet wouldn't notice, or worse, that the internet wouldn't care, but it does, and the receipts are spreading faster than any damage control team can contain them. Because when you hurt one creator, you might silence a story, but when you hurt dozens, you spark a movement, and the movement is what Blake's team failed to calculate. The creators are now comparing notes, collaborating publicly, demanding transparency, demanding accountability. And they're backed not by corporate dollars, but by audience trust. And that is something you ever. And now here we are, standing at the edge of the fire, watching the final embers of a carefully curated empire flicker into ash. Because when the truth finally claws its way to the surface, no amount of glitz, no celebrity endorsement, no studio-backed illusion can stop the collapse. And in this case, the collapse wasn't sudden. It was systematic. It was earned. It was built on silence, weaponized by fear, maintained through manipulation, and now torn apart by the very voices it tried to erase. The creators who once felt small, voiceless, isolated, have become the architects of a movement, louder, more powerful, and more united than the machine that tried to crush them. This is more than just a scandal. This is a shift in power, a warning to every elite PR machine that thought their influence was untouchable. Because when you go after creators who hold their communities in trust, you don't just risk your brand, you burn your legacy. And what Blake Lively's team did wasn't a misstep. It was a strategy, one rooted in arrogance, sustained by gatekeepers, and exposed by the resilience of those who refused to stay silent. And now the damage is irreversible. Sponsors are pulling away. Algorithms are no longer playing favorites. Platforms that once protected the narrative are now scrambling to distance themselves, and the audience is watching with eyes wide open, no longer dazzled by fame, but fueled by betrayal and clarity. And while the apologies may eventually come dressed in carefully crafted statements from smiling lawyers or scripted interviews on late-night couches, the impact is already etched into history and into the hearts of every creator who lived through this. And the worst part is, it didn't have to be this way, because accountability could have been chosen, truth could have been honored, people could have been respected, but instead, they gambled with reputations and lost everything. Now it's too late to undo what's been done, too late to hide what's already been seen, and in the end, the only thing louder than the silence they imposed is the roar of those who finally broke it.